Hello everyone, Mercurial Girl here, and today we are going to discuss the planet Mercury. We're going to talk about what Mercury looks like in each of the signs. We're going to talk about what it looks like in each of the houses. So for this video, you definitely want to pull up your birth chart and see what sign and house your Mercury falls into. Now, Mercury is near and dear to my heart because that is why I have this little sub-channel of Mercurial Girl. I am a Mercury ruled person. I am a Virgo rising, which means Mercury is my chart ruler. And with that, you can really spot like my heavy Mercury energy in my chart by talking with my hands, moving really quickly, always having a million fun facts to share, always wanting to talk and talk about literally anything. So Mercurial. But what Mercury is as a planet is it is responsible for our communication and really how we learn, how we think. And I think it's one of the coolest planets to learn a lot about, especially early on in astrology, because once you learn how Mercury presents in the different signs, you also then can kind of spot it. You can see the way someone's talking and you'll be able to start guessing more and more accurately as you notice these kind of trends with the people around you. So it's fun to pull up other people's birth charts too and kind of think about the way they talk in reference to what I'm going to be sharing with you today. Now, as always, Mercury can always be affected slightly differently than just this cut and dry of what it looks like in the sign, what it looks like in the house. And that is why a professional birth chart reading is important, because all of the different aspects to the other planets can affect the way something really presents. So although this can be pretty accurate, if it doesn't quite land, know that your Mercury could be blending with other planets, and that can slightly change the way the presentation comes out in your life. All right, so let's start with talking about Mercury through all of the different signs, beginning with Aries. I have so many Mercury Aries people in my life. Fire and air, as I have said before, like inherently get each other. So I think Mercury Aries can rub a lot of people wrong, and I don't think air and fire signs are nearly as affected by each other. But Mercury Aries people are blunt and they are not going to hold back for the sake of your feelings. They are going to say exactly what they are thinking and they literally just can't help it. I feel like for Mercury Aries people, they're almost using their voice as a way to output energy. It's kind of like a fire breathing dragon, just like taking everything out, but then they feel so much better. So sometimes their words are not always even necessarily what they think or believe. It's almost just an output of a feeling energy that is passing through. So they can say something so harsh, but to them, that was their way of releasing anger or releasing sadness. I also think Aries Mercury people tend to like just make a lot of sounds. I think a lot of the fire sign Mercuries kind of have this energy, but you'll just see them kind of just like making little noises out of their mouth. They do a lot of sighing and like, it's just a vocal energy release for them. Also, Mercury Aries people are always really passionate about what they love and what they are talking about. You just have to know that they're going to call you out on your shit if you're saying something and you're trying to withhold or you're trying to say something in a sketchy way. You're probably going to be like called out, and they also can call you out and be completely wrong. And if you give them an explanation for it, it will be just as easy for them to understand that. I just think a lot of times they just think something and spit it out, and that is just how it goes. So if you're very sensitive, that's probably not going to be the easiest thing to take, but I find them to be extremely charming. And I also think it's really, really nice to have someone that's not going to hold back in what they're going to say. Next up, let's talk about Mercury and Taurus. I am married to a Mercury Taurus, so I am around this energy all of the time. It's very funny because Mercury Taurus people are probably the slowest talkers because Taurus moves so slowly and I'm like the fastest talker, so the irony is not lost on me. It's very funny. Taurus, Mercuries, they like to learn things really deep and slowly. I also think when they're talking, they're really kind of trying to paint out this like bigger picture and really go over how something felt in multiple ways. I almost think they say the same thing like over and over again in different ways and kind of just draw it out as like this whole experience of sharing this story with you. But when they learn things really deeply. I think for them, communication isn't as much of an exchange of ideas. It's to them more of like a way to almost like talk their stuff out. They aren't doing it to hear another opinion. They're not wanting you to change their opinion. It's an output for them. They are wanting that holding space back. If you try to like respond to something a Mercury Taurus is telling you with like a counter right away, you're probably not going to be met with the receptivity of them being like, oh, okay, because they're not communicating to really receive that kind of feedback. They're more just trying to expand on their emotions and put it all out there. And there definitely is a sensualness with Taurus always. They like to romanticize everything in a way, but it's still done through a filter that is rather practical. I think what they love to share and talk about usually can be like business goals and money, and tends to fall into some of those categories because that's what they're generally more passionate about. But they will listen to you really deeply all day long, but right as I said, when they are talking, they're not really needing feedback on that talk. Just like when they are listening, they're not doing it to necessarily change your mind. They're actually just like listening and holding space. But if you're expecting your thoughts to affect theirs, probably going to be waiting a really long time for that outcome. All right, then the next up is going to be Mercury and Gemini. Hello, hello, hello. We are the fastest talkers, right? I feel like almost all Gemini Mercury people like talk with their hands and are kind of like expressive. Gemini Mercury people also are shapeshifters to match who they're around. So you can actually see a different rhythm in how they talk depending on who they're with. Gemini is always kind of like matching that social energy and playing on it. Gemini loves to give you fun facts, so it's going to be pretty tough for them to talk to you and not want to chime in and say like some stuff along the way. You just have to kind of like let Gemini do their thing and not really feel like they're necessarily trying to take anything off of you. It's just kind of I need to say this little thought really quick and just get it out, and it's fine. It's like just a quick little exchange, but Gemini is always full of fun facts. They love to share what they know. They love to talk about what they know. They love to hear what you know. There's a general curiosity with Gemini Mercury that is endless. And because Mercury is really how you also like to learn, and Gemini is such an intellectual, like wants it all sign, this is like very intense, like nerding out energy for learning like hundreds of different subjects and how they like work kind of on the surface. It's quick learning. It's not always like super deep and long learning with Gemini Mercuries, but we definitely know how to charm. All right, next up, we're going to talk about Mercury in Cancer. I think this is always so funny to watch. I've gotten better about being able to spot Mercury Cancer people. I feel like they really love to share memories and stories a little bit more. A lot of what they're talking about, you really feel cared for over time because they're going to remember like what you experienced and went through together. They love going into a past thing. Like, do you remember when this happened to us? They like are really good at storytelling because they remember things like really well, and they hold memories really near and dear to their heart. They also talk with their feelings, not really their thoughts. So you're going to hear a lot of like, I feel like this and it feels like this. It's just a lot more feeling energy, and a lot of the way they are saying stuff isn't being channeled by logic. It's going to be talking through like more of an emotional undercurrent. And I think Cancer is very intuitive and feels into stuff often, and they can be saying something that's not even necessarily being said, but they're responding to kind of like a feeling that they believe to be true about what is happening. And a lot of times they are spot on. It's just kind of a different lens of communication and thinking than some of the other signs are used to. Next up, let's talk about Mercury Leo people. Mercury Leo can present like a couple of different ways. First of all, I think they radiate sunshine. I think any strong Leo radiates that. When they're talking, it's just cute and you want to listen, and they're just like kind of beaming as they're talking about something they actually want. I think Leo always kind of likes to be heard and doesn't mind being in the spotlight. I've said this before. I think Leo gets this reputation for being so attention seeking, when in reality, they don't really necessarily want all the attention around them. They just want you to understand what they are trying to say and voice out. And if you don't quite understand it, they're gonna like keep going to kind of paint it so that everyone is feeling like what they're trying to throw down. I think Leo is really good also at making things like warm and kind of even like funny at times. Like when they are describing something, they aren't scared to talk about what they did. And even if it's like kind of embarrassing, Leo always has that braver energy. They'll be willing to like admit their mistakes a lot more than some other signs and like talk it out. And although it could be embarrassing, they don't only keep it to the positive, but they know how to make everything inherently like kind of funny and charming anyway. When Mercury Leo people are talking, you should pay attention to them. It can feel like really hurtful when they're just like not being heard, because when they are talking, they're usually trying to share and transmute a feeling with you. Next up, let's talk about Mercury Virgo people. Virgo energy has a little bit of similarity to Gemini. I think Mercury Virgo people have like kind of that like nervousness energy too, sometimes fidgeting with their hands, maybe like a little bit of just kind of like shaky quirkiness to them too. Mercury Virgo people are not going to be the first to talk. That is the big difference between Gemini and Virgo, that are both actually ruled by the planet Mercury. Is Virgo wants to always watch and kind of notice the details of something first. They want to deeply understand something before they like just go and talk about it. I think they really gauge what their environment is telling them is okay to go into. Virgo always has a little bit of a perfectionist tendency. So when they go into something, it's really deep. And when they're talking, they want to be thorough about what they're explaining. So they usually hang back until that kind of feels safe. And then when they do talk, it has a very practical point A to point B like energy behind it. They have thought about it through multiple lenses of perspective. They're going to paint out kind of the details along the way of that. And they also really value like having a plan and knowing where things are going, and just like to kind of talk out things even along those subjects. Like, what is this going to look like? What are your thoughts on this? Like, what are your expectations around this? Like, it has a little bit more of a thoroughness to it. Next up, let's talk about Mercury in Libra people. I think Libra also kind of can change like person to person, as with air signs. That's just how it goes. Gemini's an air sign, Libra's an air sign, our Aquarius is our air signs. And they kind of adapt to their social environment a lot. I think Libra, as they always get this label of being unopinionated and kind of like playing off of people, but I feel like it's very easy to tell like an opinion that Libra is playing off of. I think a lot of times they play devil's advocate a lot and like will throw out not only an opinion that you're having, but kind of a counter opinion through the questions they ask. They're not always doing it in a like malicious way. It can be very charming to where you don't really realize it. And I do think they'll thoroughly hear out your opinion, but I don't think Libra Mercury people are always as agreeable as they get the reputation of being. I don't think they like conflict, and they will fold eventually, but I also don't think they are completely against stirring the pot. I do think they like to hear kind of like a verbal debate about something, but in a way where it feels good. to people, but they like to just like throw out another option. So like, what about this then? And I think they enjoy that little bit of like a debate energy, as long as it's kind of staying positive. If they feel like it's becoming overwhelming, I think they'll kind of like fold away from that, because they relatively want to keep things kind of chill. But all air signs like an exchange of thought and idea. That's just how it's gonna go. Next up, let's talk about Mercury Scorpio people. Now, Scorpio is always trying to get you to reveal as much as possible, while they reveal very little in return. So Mercury Scorpio is always playing this undercover investigative game. They're also the ones that are definitely at home going to go into like stocky research mode and like have so much that they looked into that you probably don't even like know. They've like filled in all these like little pieces. I also think when they talk, it's a lot sometimes to pull out details, so then they know how safe they are to give stuff back to you. They love to merge and figure everything out. They are mysterious themselves by reputation, but I do think if you're more likely to just give without someone having to claw it out of you, you're gonna see Mercury and Scorpio people also give you a little bit of a bite back. They got to make sure that they're safe to do it, and they're gonna play like a little bit of a mind game to end up in that spot to feel safe to do that. There's always a sensual energy with Scorpio. They're always kind of playing this like sarcastic bantery game. And that's just because they like to see how you respond to different things. It's a fun game for them. Next up, let's talk about Mercury and Sagittarius people. I also have many friends with this placement, fire and air, as I said. Mercury and Sagittarius is really funny. I think they have a really quiet mode and then a really loud mode. And it doesn't feel like it's like there's a much of an in-between. They're either kind of cool and back and just chilling and like learning and watching from the experience, or they come online and are like really excited about something. Most of them have like kind of this like loud, vivacious laugh that they have too. And Mercury Sagittarius people are like kind of the jokesters. They have that fiery energy, but I think they like love to play on things. It's a mutable sign as well, so it likes to play on what is being thrown out there. So they can take something you said and bounce a new joke off of it, and they like the back and forth. They like to hear like your take on something, their take on something. They always have like a wittiness and kind of cheesiness energy to their joking. And yeah, I think it's really funny that they also at times like can get really serious and love to learn and love to study into spirituality and different subjects. They like to learn through travel and through experience as well. So they have a side that can be really receptive, and then a side that can really socialize and play within that. Now, next up, we have our Mercury and Capricorn people. Now, Capricorn is always kind of tough on themselves, right? They set really high goals and really high values for how life plays out. They are usually kind of like more business and work minded. And so I think a lot of the way they talk is like their goals and dreams are going to come out somewhere within that conversation. I think they're really great at listening, and they don't make it all about themselves. I think they really value hearing the opinions of other people, because often I think it's really hard for them because they can be a little bit harsher on themselves to hear the feedback that comes from other people and how they are taking on the situation as well. Capricorn, even with all its reputations for being kind of like a workaholic, it's still charged by a feminine, earthy energy. It, in the end, just wants a lot of safety to be able to relax. And I think that they love to share and talk about the things that you have goals for too, and what your hopes and dreams are and values are. And it's a really good energy exchange. It's not always just a me exchange. And I do think there's some stubbornness with Capricorn, but I don't think that they're not going to be receptive to your feedback. It's just they're always thinking about how they're doing things too. And so they're going to value their own journey as well. Next up, let's talk about Mercury Aquarius people. I think there is always like a quirky, eccentric nature to Mercury and Aquarius. I do a podcast with a Mercury and Aquarius person. And yeah, they have these like cheesy jokes that will like take you out that you just were not expecting. I think they just like drop little quirky lines out of nowhere that it always makes me laugh. I don't think everyone always hears them because they don't always do it in this big, loud way. Aquarius is always thinking outside of the box. They're always wanting to zoom out for the greater good, find kind of an unattached emotional opinion about something. They like to think on the outside and help you walk yourself to an opinion that's not too bogged down by thinking patterns and feeling patterns. And they're good with that detachedness to be able to give advice to you in a way that can feel a little bit more grounded because it's not so, colored in with all these other lenses and things. I think they are zooming out for the greater good a lot of time. They like to share what they know and what they think. And their own journey and what they have taken in is a lot about how they're going to talk and communicate. So if you're not really into the same subject matter as them, it's probably going to be a little harder for them to add feedback. And I think Aquarius definitely has an introverted mode that can come into play, especially when they don't feel like they're fully being valued in what their opinion is. It has a fixed nature. So what they are into is what is going to kind of like be all encompassing and what they want to talk about and communicate about. Finally, we have our Mercury and Pisces people. These people like crack me up because Mercury and Pisces is so intuitive and so really mystical and channeling from the spiritual realm like all of the time. So Mercury Pisces people have no idea what they're talking about. I think they probably very rarely can even repeat what they just said. They are saying stuff that I truly feel like is coming from another cosmic realm that they are supposed to say. I feel like I have received like crazy wisdom from Mercury Pisces people, but they would never know they gave me wisdom. They just tend to say things and I think they're confused why they're even saying them. I think they can appear like lost and detached from what is happening, but it's because I feel like they're always receiving messages from elsewhere. And so for them, they have this kind of imaginative way of talking. It doesn't always fully sync up to reality, but I don't think that means that they don't care and they're not listening and it's not still coming in. It's just, it's being read through an intuitive feeling, so much less than like actually black and white of what is fully present and happening. They definitely have like a charm behind how they talk. They also usually have these big eyes. Like I feel like you can always spot like prominent Pisces placements and they're like really listening and really tuning in lots of ways. And you can see it when they like lock eyes with you. So that is Mercury in all of the signs. And so I think it's a really fun exercise to not only look at your own, but also the people around you, as I said, and see how people talk and interact, see what signs you maybe have a little bit more trouble understanding. I think we can all learn to communicate with practice, but there is definitely different lenses at which we do that. Okay, now let's talk about Mercury in the houses, but I want to reiterate one more time that if Mercury is in one of the signs and that completely kind of contradicts what the house's energy typically is, it can definitely manifest a little bit differently because sometimes like a fire Mercury put in a house that's very watery, it's gonna kind of channel it a little bit different. So definitely that is the perk of getting an astrology reading, is you get to kind of see how the whole puzzle piece fits together. But here is like a general of Mercury in all of the houses. So Mercury in house one is the house of self, whatever is there, first of all of our rising signs are there. You really can notice and see this in the way someone is moving through the world. A planet is so far from hidden when it is in the first house. And Mercury people just have this kind of like intellectual curiousness and almost kind of a can't sit still energy that you will be able to see. They're usually very chatty, love to share what they know. There's definitely a lot of like verbal banter and verbal exchange because they love to talk and get stimulated mentally. It's like extra parent, and you're going to feed off of that energy and really be able to see it in person. Now, Mercury in the second house rules kind of personal possessions, personal finance, like what we have and possess. And when Mercury is there, these people are kind of like the epitome of like show and tell. Like they love to talk about the gadgets that they've got, the things that have made life easier, how that has played out. They really like to talk about what they have given, or they really like to talk about like what they own and why they got it, and just kind of like show and tell energy, you know? And I think Mercury in the second house, they can be a little careless with money because Mercury is a little bit erratic, but they also can end up channeling that into being kind of passionate about that subject as well and digging into what to do about matters in that house. And sometimes that can look like having multiple sources of money or multiple business ideas kind of going on. So all of that can shuffle into the second house. Now, Mercury in the third house is our house of communication. So when Mercury is there, you're going to get someone who's really, really good at communicating. They will love to talk and exchange ideas. It kind of gives a little bit more of like an extroverted energy. The third house kind of rules like the people within our neighborhood and more immediate environment. So they're usually going to be the ones that'll like stop and want to chat with people like along the way. They like that exchange close by. I also think Mercury in the third house is a really good placement to want to write and to share your voice through different avenues. The third house does really good when strong planets are there in writing. Now, fourth house, Mercury, this channels it a little bit differently. The fourth house is the house of home and family, and Mercury being there kind of gives this like work from home energy, or like kind of like a moody intellectual house. So like I'm picturing like a bookworm with like tons of books, like really their house almost kind of reflects what they know in sort of a way. This can be like a family business energy, like somewhere in the family, there's like an exchange of how you interact, how you even make money, how you learn, and probably the way your parents raised you influences you a lot more here in how you think because of Mercury being in that house. Now, Mercury in the fifth house also kind of gives that like playful energy. The fifth house is the house of creativity. And so communication is like a form of self-expression here. So you need outlets for it, like regardless of what that looks like. It can be lots of different hobbies that you get to channel into. It can be lots of ways you get to talk and banter. There is definitely a thirst for tons of information with that fifth house energy. And yeah, that one definitely needs its creative expression, or it can feel like very, very stifling with Mercury there, because Mercury is always kind of erratic, and the fifth house has a lot of like busy, fun, pleasure-seeking energy. You just have to watch for maybe being slightly detached with Mercury being in that house. Now, Mercury in the sixth house is the house of daily routine and structure. And because Mercury is kind of quick and erratic, it can be a little tough to like fully keep up with everything that you need to do. I would say Mercury in the sixth house people are going to be really into subjects around like health and body, and mind and body always plays into the sixth house. So they'll know all those things. Actually applying it is going to be a little bit more tricky. So learning how to really develop a routine that works for the way your brain functions is going to be really helpful with Mercury in the 6th house. 6th house is also kind of our work ethic, and Mercury being here can make you kind of want to jump from workplace to workplace. You want to find something that feels really mentally stimulating and gives you like kind of a little bit more of a way to express that out so you don't feel stifled. Mercury in the 7th house. The 7th house is all about partnerships, marriage, relationships, like very intimate relationships. So Mercury here makes you really want to bounce ideas off the people that you really care about. You want to hear what their opinion is. You want them to hear what your opinion is. Lots of energy around that like close and intimate way of communicating. Mercury in the 8th house. The 8th house is our mystical dark house. It's known as the house of death, sex, transformation, rebirth. It has definitely like an energy around vulnerability. There's a lot that can filter and present in the 8th house. Now, Mercury here makes you have a lot of that investigator, like Mercury Scorpio energy, regardless of what sign it's in. You want to deeply learn and understand things and how they work. It gives you tons of mental energy for depth, and anything shallow is going to feel like very annoying to Mercury in the 8th house. I also feel like Mercury here, you got to learn to be vulnerable. This is a lesson with any 8th house placement, but I think you just really need to learn to trust people with Mercury in the 8th house. Find the people that you're going to be able to release and find that intimacy and deep communication that you're so craving, or it can get a little dark. 8th and 12th house placements can always get a little dark if they're not finding like an outlet. And so knowing that your voice matters, your vulnerability matters, and finding a way that you can channel that in a safe way is important, because you know a lot, you're feeling a lot, and you need ways to share that. Now, Mercury in the 9th house gives like that nerdy, I want to know it, I want to learn it, I am a student for life. There is always something to learn, and that can be really exciting for Mercury in the 9th house. Sometimes this looks like them just like researching into odds and ends through so many topics. It also can look like a traveling person that loves to go to different places to learn lots of different things and doesn't want to ever really stay put. And yeah, Mercury here is always going to want to keep advancing what they know. I think the only trouble spot here is it can always feel like there's something more to know to sometimes get stuff out. So making sure once again that you have like an outlet, and it's not all learning, all mental, and then not like any way to output it. So make sure you're kind of sharing that in some form of expression. Mercury in the 10th house, I have this placement. The 10th house is the house of career and public image and how you're perceived socially. So Mercury here loves to share information with the public, aka having a TikTok page, having a YouTube channel, all of the things. It feels really good to share what you know, and you're usually kind of well received for that information. Mercury here also usually leads to having like lots of different jobs or switching jobs often. It can feel really stifling to be stuck in one way. And generally, the more you kind of channel that Mercury energy and have outlets through work and just what you share and give to the public, the more you feel balanced and the more you feel like you're being received. Mercury here definitely has a positive outlook and a charm that gets to be perceived by the public when it's here. Mercury in the 11th house. 11th house is the house of friendships, hopes, dreams. And Mercury here like really likes to give an opinion that maybe like other people are not thinking about. They like to have their opinion valued within their friend groups, to share what their thoughts are on something. And I think they really get valued for that in return. This is definitely like an extroverted energy house. I guess it definitely depends on the sign. Like that could be channeled slightly different here especially, but Mercury loves lots of stuff going on, and the 11th house really likes to have like lots of friends, lots of a social life. So definitely comes together to be someone that likes to have their friends around, likes to converse and talk about like wide variety of subjects. Now, Mercury in the 12th house, these people are just like that Mercury in Pisces I was sharing. 12th house is traditionally ruled by Pisces. This is one of our other darker houses. And when I say dark, it's not to imply that it's like a bad placement. It just means that there's an undercurrent, a spiritual essence, a mystical energy behind it. The 12th house is known as the house of the subconscious, also the house of karma, the house of the unseen. It has like a lot of mysticism behind it. Mercury here makes you extremely highly sensitive. You need all of the tools for self-care, alone time, regulating back down. 8th house placements also usually need a little bit of this as well, but especially 12th house. You tend to need that alone time to process things. I think 12th house Mercury people are also usually channeling from the other side. I have done so many readings on Mercury 12th house people that are completely able to talk to ghosts, spirits, people in other realms. They channel a lot through their dreams, and they also usually are very comfortable when I say this stuff to them, because they'll be like, oh yeah, I've been talking to ghosts since I was like a little kid. It's like no second thought to them, and that has happened probably in like 50 readings. So it continuously blows my mind and is so cool. But there is definitely like a mediumship channeling here, but also it can be really tricky because you're receiving so much information that a lot of times you really have to have that unplug to be able to wind down and see where you start and all of that other stuff you're experiencing begins. This has been a little overview of Mercury, and one of my main reasons I wanted to dive into this now is because we're about to near another Mercury retrograde. Whenever this video finds you, I'm definitely going to do another part talking about Mercury retrograde and what that looks like in connection to all of this. But I hope this helps you understand your Mercury placement more. I hope this helps you understand communication, and you can really learn to use that to trust that the way you communicate is exactly as it should be, and learning how to value the way other people are sharing things and maximize the qualities of those signs instead of over personalizing the differences between us, learning that we all have these cosmic ways we're influenced, and that can bring us so closer together. If you ever want a personal birth chart reading, you can go to sensefulwellness.com, where I offer one-on-one birth chart readings, and I can help you deep dive into your own chart. I will see you guys next week with more Mercurial Girl.